Game begin.
Hello and welcome back to the Spike Colony podcast. I am here with Iron Man, Mike Flores, and your regular co-host, me, the Hulk, Lanny Huang. How's it going, Iron Man?
I prefer to be called champion. Maybe like number one Iron Man, Red Deck winner. And any of those would suffice.
This guy had 3 O's F&M one time, and that's just kind of like winning pub trivia and thinking you're Ken Jennings. You're just like, guys, I won pub trivia last weekend.
I mean, and I was just, I haven't won a meetup since December last year, right? And
yeah, since SWB.
SWB he's just like, no, I won one and Andy won one in December. You didn't win in December. And I'm like, no, I beat you. You were on the pit rack deck, and he's like, that was November. And then, just going 3-0 in the league this week is so not good enough. It's like not really winning a meetup. Bill didn't bring the belt. It's just like, this isn't just a league. This isn't a belt granting activity. There was a 3-0 Oath Ponza player who was first time in the format who beat Bill to take the other 3-0. And everyone's like, oh, you guys should play for the belt.
Yeah, you guys have to play.
There was no belt, so why play? So I just left because Bill was on burn, and the Oath Ponza guy had defeated him. So I was just like, I'm piecing out of here before this comes due. And then I forgot to get my prize, which
is just a gift card. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's enough gift card to pay for next week's entry and like an oat milk latte.
I mean, we'll take it. So you played Burn. You made the deck slightly better, not all the way better, but slightly better.
Slantified. I thought it was great, just straight up great. I think I really didn't like cutting the lava dart that I cut. I know you would have cut more lava darts, but they came up in matchups that I was in, right? So
the matchups that you won, anyways.
I did win. I mean, for example,
so who cares?
I was up against Devourer, and Lava Dart's relevant there because you get free damage if they try to kill you with the altar kill, yeah. And then I played against Clerics, where Lava Dart's actually excellent against Clerics, right? They have a lot of 1/1 and 2/1 creatures. They have some 3/1s also. The 1/1 is one of their key creatures.
It's Supplicant and Priest of Gigs.
So it's very good in that matchup. But to be fair,
but the card you have instead is Sulfuric Vortex, which turns off Cabal Archon, which is
also excellent.
Yeah, which is the scariest card for them. Because they're never activating Dark Supplicant.
It was pretty interesting. In that matchup, because I had been told by Jeff, so I played against Jeff Ferris in the last round. I was told by Jeff that this burn was the bad matchup, right? And so he crushed me in game 1. It wasn't even close. I mean, he got a good Cabal therapy that got double ball lightning on turn 2, and so I was way behind because of his Cabal therapy, and I was just like, this doesn't feel good for burn at all, because then he got multiple Cabal Archons and multiple Rotlung Reanimators. So I'm like, I don't know what gear I can play. He took 2 ball lightnings. It's going to be hard to go to face, right? He's just so much better on the battlefield. But then in games 2 and 3, I was just like Grim Lavamancer, Curse Scroll, Sulfuric Vortex. It did not.
Yeah, the primary removal spell for that deck is Snuff Out. I can't imagine.
Well, no, he sided in Spinning Darkness, which was hilarious because it just never had any. He spun one decent target in game 3, but he drew 3 Spinning Darkness in game 3.
Right.
And I literally just had Mog Fanatics as my attackers in game 3, and he eventually had to spin Mog Fanatic because I just played Sulfuric Vortex.
Yeah, you don't have a ton of targets. You would have just Jackal Pup and Lavamancer are only creatures.
And ball lightning. So I had 1 ball lightning
in
my deck in the sideboarded games. Just 1.
You have to mix your Spinning Darkness and Vicious Hungers then.
Well, I think Funeral Charm is the card you should play. That's what I told him. And it's good with your primary plan.
I mean, it's Funeral Charm is pretty average when it isn't killing a creature. sometimes it's a shock. I had to explain that to SWB because he just he just had me one time, and he like, I was just like, just 2-1 your creature, and he's just like, what? And then he like looks down at the card and he's like, target creature gets +2 -1.
I won a Pro Tour qualifier that way.
Yeah,
I used all the modes in that Pro Tour qualifier, to be fair. Let's see. So I thought my deck was excellent. The changes were took out the foil-etched shocks. Sorry, buddies. For Seal of Fire, which is just, we've been talking about this change for a long time. That's an excellent change. Took out 1 Lava Dart for 1 Sulfuric Vortex, and I added the 4th Barbarian Ring, which you have been clamoring about, and it was also a good move. Although I played against multiple Sabo's Web decks over the course of the tournament.
I mean, yeah, if they Sabo's Web you, they got you, but then also like
neither of them drew it.
Yeah, I mean, if their deck does not have cards to sideboard in ahead of Sabo's Web, then you probably don't mind sometimes having a tapped Barbarian Ring, if and only if you draw it and tap it before the Sabo's Web. And then every other time, it still deals 2 damage. So, yeah, it's like, I get this sometimes because people seem to be like pretty infatuated with bringing in Sabo's Web against goblins to just turn off the 4 copies of Rishadan Port. And I was just
Some of them don't even have Port; they have Wasteland.
Well, you would have seen it in game 1, Mike. I mean,
okay.
Just like, so you see Port in game 1. Obviously, if you see Wasteland in game 1, you don't bring in Sabo's Web. And just like I mean, I guess maybe if you're playing a like deck that has lots of counterspell and no answers to like Siege Gang Commander, then you're like really cold to like your opponent going port Siege Gang. Maybe, I don't know. But I was just like, yeah, I don't bring in Sabo's Web versus goblins. Like, I'm trying to put creatures on the battlefield,
You're trying to not get run over by
or remove creatures from the battlefield
by a goblin lackey. Like, let's not go with that plan.
Yeah, honestly, Rishadan Port gets worse in games 2 and 3 because in game 1, it's more likely that Goblin Lackey survives before you bring in all your answers to Goblin Lackey, and then at that point you're able to get ahead on board. Like if you just go turn 1 Mog Fanatic and then turns 2 and 3 and 4 port you, you're just like not getting anywhere like in a meaningful speed. So
round 1 I played against Devourer, which has main deck Sabo's Web, though he drew it in 0 of the 3 games we played. And then in round 2, I played against Replenish, which if they have Sabo's Web, it's in the main deck. Although I did not see it. I just assume he had Sabo's Web because people tend to have Sabo's Web in that deck. But maybe he didn't have it.
No, I mean, I wouldn't play any Sabo's Web in my Replenish deck in this day and age.
You don't even play Frantic Search now.
Yeah,
you are some kind of a crazy man in terms of your Replenish tuning. So no one should listen to your advice in terms of what people might expect in Replenish. You might be playing the Replenish deck they, quote unquote, should play opportunistically, but no Frantic Search is a bold claim.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really play enough of the different kinds of Replenish because I sort of hate every iteration for different reasons. Like, so to give listeners some background, I am 6-0 and on to the playoffs once again with Replenish, mostly built on, like, I would just kind of talk to the doctor, David Raska, about the deck a little, and sort of he had a build that had 0 Frantic Search, and I was just like, oh, your bold statement is that Frantic Search is the scam, not attunement. But he and I agree on some things, namely playing 4 intuitions. And so, and he said the normal stuff about attunement, just like, oh, if your opponent just like isn't interacting and isn't putting a clock on the battlefield, like if your opponent isn't doing these things, attunement like trends you towards victory very, very easily, right? So like against your like not blue mid-range opponent, attunement just means you'll win before they kill you because they just don't have good interaction.
Yeah, unless they have the right. particular cards that mess up attunement.
But the play patterns, the play pattern of attunement is still horrible. Like I think it feels great when you're fast against mid-range, but you're just like, okay, this turn, I'm going to play a 4 casting cost spell. Next turn, I'm going to cast Attunement. Then the turn after that, I'm going to spin Attunement and then cast a 4 casting cost spell. And then next turn, I'm going to take a turn off so I can recast Attunement. And it's just like, you're just
you've cast
playing.
This many 4 casting cost spells and spun Attunement twice, I think your opponent might be dead if they're mid-range.
I mean, one, you can miss, right? So sometimes you go like spin Attunement, miss, and you're like, okay, I guess I'm recasting Attunement. And then sometimes you go like spin Attunement, and your 4 casting cost spell is like Parallax Wave, right? So you're just like, okay, I guess all I got is Parallax Wave. So you play Parallax Wave, you pass the turn, your opponent does anything. But for what it's worth, if it's a creature, it gets waved out, right? So your opponent does anything, but it could be a creature, in which case it doesn't matter.
Could be
and then you pass the turn and you play Attunement again because your top deck didn't give you anything. And then your opponent just does anything else again. And then it's your turn again, and then you cast Opalescence. And your opponent, who has a brain and can see what's coming because they know the cards in your deck, is just like, okay, I'll disenchant the Parallax Wave. And so now you have an Attunement. Or now you have an Attunement and an Opalescence. Well, the Attunement's in your hand because you have to play it the next turn. And I'm just like, this is like the slowest combo deck that's ever been played, where you just play.
Sometimes it's not.
You play one card every other turn. Yeah, and then the whole thing is just hinged around replenish. And if your opponent is just like a deck with counter spells or a deck with graveyard interaction, then they turn off your replenish. And then so it's just like, if you just don't have like, and you're not gaining any cards, like you're not gaining cards. So sometimes you just spin Attunement down to like 2 cards in hand. So I had like 2 cards in hand with an Attunement on the battlefield. My opponent vindicates the Attunement and has black-white available.
Can't you respond by picking the Attunement?
Absolutely, but I have 2 cards in hand and Attunement play, and my opponent vindicates it, and they have BW untapped.
Oh, so the question is, how bad are the 2 cards you have in hand versus roll? Because you're going to lose everything.
I'm actually just going to lose everything no matter what, right? So I was just like, okay, I can spin this Attunement, but if I like spin this Attunement and then I get Gerard's Verdict, I also might just get Haunting Echoes afterwards, or like Cryptid, or...
this is pretty deep in the game, man.
Yeah. Well, because they have 5 mana, right? So I was just like, okay, I guess Vindicate resolves, because I'm not going to like save this Attunement so that I can just like discard it to Gerard's Verdict, unless I wanted them not to gain life, right? Because my hand was like land useless thing. Anyways, the kicker to this was they just didn't have Verdict, so they just vindicated the Attunement because they wanted me to spin it, I guess. They're just like, seems good enough. Either that or they just didn't understand I could use it at instant speed. But in any case, that was like, I was just like sitting there and getting verdicted and duressed and whatever. And then I was like, oh, Attunement's not even good here. Like, it's good if the replenish is like in the top 3 and your graveyard stock and the Attunement's in play, and then you like draw for the turn. But it's actually kind of like a liability if they have anything. Like if they have graveyard interaction or if they have a counter spell, then Attunement's really messing with you. But anyways, my matchups were just not decks that interacted well. I played against 2 survival decks, which are notoriously really bad against replenish. I played the mirror, and my opponent just walked into a stifle on the returns trigger of their Parallax Wave. So they just didn't wave out my blue source, or tied out my blue source when they were executing the combo. So I was just like, okay, I'll stifle the P Wave return trigger, and then they scooped on the spot. And then, so I didn't like play against like a blue based control deck. I didn't get to test the Singleton Mystic Remora in my sideboard, et cetera. But regardless, I played Attunement. I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't lose a match. So we'll see how it goes in the playoffs.
What if you won?
I mean, I would only regret that I just didn't play the deck at LogicCon. It was like we were talking about the night before, and we're just Replenish was just really far down on my list, right? We talked about it. I had known that if I was going to panic and switch to Replenish the night before LogicCon, because that's when I decided my deck was the night before, I knew I was going to play Zero Frantic Search. But the open-ended questions were like, how many stifles am I going to play main deck? Am I going to play Fact or Fiction, Impulse, or Deep Analysis main deck?
I told you I liked Factor Fiction and was entertaining the idea of Impulse, prior to LobsterCon. But you told me you didn't like Factor Fiction because you have already so many forecasting custom bugs.
Yeah, that's true.
Your argument.
Well, my so I kind of couldn't figure out, and I'm still figuring this out, right? So maybe you can help me solve the puzzle. So you have 16 4-drops, and you need to see all 4 of them in a game. So should you play less than 4 copies of any of them? Would you trim one Opalescence and then play one Factor Fiction instead of Opalescence?
When I top 8'd LobsterCon with a replenish 3 years ago, I only played 3 Opalescence, right? If you look at some of Rich Shea's lists that he's won monthlies with, he only plays 3 waves, right? Somebody who plays 3 waves is a very particular
right. So this
right?
this is the tension. This is like the internal tension of replenish, right? Which is that if you trim either wave or opal, it's less so if you're trimming opal because let's unpack each one. So the first one is you trim opal. This is a very popular thing to do. The reason you trim opal is that if you cast opal, nothing happens. So it's a good enough reason to trim the card in the deck.
So it's to be fair, it depends on the matchup because like sometimes people just have to respect the fact that you're casting it.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking literally, like that turn, if on turn 3 you like Ancient Tomb or whatever, or on turn 4 you just like tap 4 lands and you cast Opalescence, like you have to pass the turn and you might just die, right? Like you might, or your opponent will just like disenchant it and then you just like play on or whatever. Like the point is, it's like Opalescence is almost like casting a face down angel, right? It's like, I'm going to play this card, and in the future, once I spend more mana, this card is going to do something. But right now, it's just a 2/2, or in this case, it's just an Opalescence. Yeah. So it's like,
I think like in the days when land still was like a more prevalent part of the metagame, or the aggressive decks were a little bit less tuned than they are today, you could probably get away with stuff like that a little bit more than you can today.
Yeah, just pass the turn. You just spend 4 mana, pass the turn. So that's one thing for trimming the Opalescence. But the problem is you can't win the game without an Opalescence on the battlefield.
You literally, in game 1, typically you literally can't win without an Opalescence.
So there's a lot of games where like maybe you've tide comboed your opponent twice, and like 6 turns later they're still hanging in there like with like a nimble mongoose or something, and you're just like desperately looking for Opalescence because your deck just doesn't do anything without an Opalescence in play, and you might just like die to a nimble mongoose or a meddling mage or just like something random and bad. So that's one reason why you would want to play 4 Opalescence, is because you want to see it. And so the Rascal list that he sent me basically was just like, well, if you play 4 Intuition, you're just going to find your Opalescence eventually, because 4 Intuition plus 3 Opalescence. That's like you'll just have Opalescence in the mix.
Which, yeah, I really like that thought process.
Yeah.
To me, when I never tried Factor Fiction. I saw. I can't remember. It was Fran, right, who tested it on.
I don't. It's been in the mix, right?
You and Fran, I think. I watched Magic Online videos on YouTube about this, and what impressed me about it was it almost didn't matter how the splits went.
Right, you always got what you
just cast it, and you just got all 5 cards basically all the time, and that's really really amazing. It's 23andMe-esque.
Right. So riddle me that. Yeah, you're right. Damned if like the fact it's a game winning Factor Fiction. So riddle me this. So here's the thing: you cast Factor Fiction, and you need your opponent to basically cast Factor Fiction, and there's some enchantments and there's some replenish. So there's no way for them to split it, except for to like just give you everything, which is like, okay, well, you can have replenish and all the enchantments, and then I'm just going to need to figure out how to deal with this. But if you have an attunement in play, they're cooked, right? So like the split could be like Opalescence, replenish, attunement, and then they're just like, well, there's no way to split these. But riddle me this. So say you want to play Factor Fiction in your deck, but you don't really like the idea of playing 17 and or 18 or 19 4-drops. Do you trim an Opalescence, but then use the Factor Fiction to then try to find the Opalescence again, and then you're like making the Factor Fiction 8, like you're making the Opalescence 8 mana then?
That's like when I qualified for the U.S. Nationals in 2000 with Napster. We played Napster at Nationals, but I qualified with Napster first. The first correction that Dan OMS and Johnny made was to add the 4th vampiric tutor.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, well, I'm playing this vampiric tutor deck, and I have all of these bullets, right? I need to make room for all these bullets.
Yeah. So you trimmed a tutor.
So I cut a tutor, right? Like, this is, I don't know what the right finish to this sentence is. I know that we cut a lot of like the cards that I just played at regionals. I think I played like 3 powder kegs at regionals. We played like 1 or 0 at nationals, something like that. But I think that you will find your cuts in interesting places, right? So you asked a question earlier about like, how many stifles should I play? I would play 0, right? So, how many sword supply shares are you going to play? I played 1 when I top 8'd. I had access to all 4, but I only played 1 in the main deck. I don't think I would be cutting opalescences if this was my strategy. If I'm a 4 intuition, multiple factor fiction kind of guy, you need to touch that opalescence, right? That cardboard has to touch your hand or your graveyard. And it is, I guess you go 5 deeper if you spend 8 mana, but maybe you don't, right? Like, what if it gets countered?
Yeah,
if the opalescence gets countered, that's no big deal. But if the factor fiction gets countered, you're like,
yeah, or they just
time walks.
They just like, they give you like 2 lands and a replenish. You cast the replenish and they counter it, and then whatever. But there's a lot of things that just kind of don't really make sense. So the stifles are basically just an out to not drawing the full combo, right? So sometimes you just draw Parallax Tide, and if you like just draw Parallax Tide, it's really good if you have a stifle. In fact, it's really good if stifles are in your deck, so that if you just draw Parallax Tide and Intuition, you can upkeep Intuition for stifle and then stifle the least play trigger. And the other thing that makes Stifle such a good candidate for this deck over Chain of Vapor and even Seal of Cleansing, which is like the most intuitive card to play.
Well, Seal of Cleansing has other synergy.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Is like, even though Seal of Cleansing is the most intuitive card to play, is that the Parallax Tide being a double time walk in the Replenish deck is like extremely important, because getting that mana in back-to-back turns is like mana you need, right? So if Seal Tide 3 lands, you don't get the double time walk where they also can't play additional lands, and that's a huge deal.
The Achilles heel of Replenish is, of course, that it's the contending for best deck status and also has 16, if now not 20 forecasting cost spells.
Right, just have just play 4 factor fiction.
Well, if I could live long enough to cast all this stuff, you're in trouble.
Right.
Unless you killed me.
So let's talk about trimming 1 Parallax Wave. I think trimming 1 Parallax Wave seems pretty seems like it's basically the same thing, but
Wave was so good to me. I pulled up my list from 2003 just to look at it, see what I did. I had 23 lands. I assume you have 24 or more lands.
I have 26, and I have lots of basic lands.
Way more than 23 lands. But I had four Careful Study, which both kind of act like lands in the early game, act like factor fictions in a kind of dumb way.
Yeah, just a horrible factor fiction.
Horrible factor fiction. But also allow me to mulligan more than normal.
Yeah, well, you also had Squeeze. So, like, the more Squee, the better all of your looting was.
Yeah, but I think, like, the Careful Studies counteract the lower land count, at least somewhat. So I played 3 Opalescence, 4 Intuition, 3 Frantic Search. But you have 4 Plow, 3 Plow? What do you do?
Yeah, I play 4 Swords of Plowshares. It seems pretty...
I think I might cut some swords before I cut Wave. And the reason for that is Wave is actually part of Plan A, and then also has Swords of Plowshares functionality.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, except for when you cut all those Swords of Plowshares from your deck, you don't do anything for 3 turns. Like, it's just like that's why Mana Leak is in the deck, right? It's just like, you just don't do anything. Like, you just sit there and you don't do anything.
God forbid you don't hit your 4th land drop naturally.
Yeah,
that's really... So how many attunements do you have in this piece then?
So I'm playing 4 attunement. I think that I could play...
I think you have to. Or you need
to do something on turn 3. Yeah.
You have to maximize your likelihood of having something to do at any point before turn 4.
Right. Well, attunement guarantees that you'll do something. You'll be able to select.
It increases because you don't have that many. You don't have that many plays that cost less than 4. Just playing 4 copies of attunement increases your chances of doing something.
Right.
You know, well,
it's also important that it selects for like the good something, right? Because you can always do something. But that something might be an opalescence. So ideally, you spin attunement, and then you play a Parallax Tide, and then you stifle it, and then later you play an opalescence, right? So like you go through a few different game trees. Every game tree is like pretty good that starts with Swords to Plowshares, because most of the time that Swords to Plowshares is going to buy you like 2 turns rather than just 1, right? So Swords to Plowshares is probably going to make a lot of your like worlds better, and it's going to be good just because it's 1 mana, so that you can just cast it and something else in the same turn, or you could like, you know, cast it off an impulse, cast it off an attunement spin or whatever. But aside from that, you kind of have like the intuition plus replenish equals I win. You have tide plus stifle equals I will then intuition and replenish at a later date and then probably win, and then sometimes you'll cast opalescence and parallax wave while your opponent sits on their hands and just like casts a wall of blossoms, in which case you start like
you win.
Yeah,
wall of blossoms is your win condition,
in which case you get pretty excited. So those are all the worlds, and like I think that if you don't have stifle, it's sort of okay. You can also just like play tide without stifle backup, and then use that as like a double time walk, and in the stifle slot you just fill out with your
so
looting
the value
effects.
of stifle really is the ability to drag it out over multiple turns and then also constrict your mana somewhat, right? Because like the equivalent chain combo is a 5 mana combo, the stifle combo is a 4 mana combo.
Notably it's you too.
But this is if you can cast the tide half, it implies the ability to cast the stifle half, and you can do this over any number of turns, right? It doesn't even have to be 2 turns.
Right. The most important part being this deck can cast Parallax Tide on turn 3, but if you're turn 3 on the play, your opponent
has 2 lands.
Will have no land. They have 2 lands in play, so you're like, okay, I'll tide 2 lands, and then you'll pass, and then they'll be like, so if it was seal combo, right, you just do nothing.
I am sold on stifle already.
Yeah.
Like, this is so the question is how many Rich play? 1, 2?
Rich has played anywhere between 0 and 2, and the Doctor is the only one who's like a pretty strong advocate for 3, for the sole purpose of untapping and intuitioning for it in your upkeep.
Oh, that is amazing. I like that synergy a lot. And on top of that, don't forget that you have the ability to stifle a wasteland, stifle...
Exactly. That's another... you can stifle a Tormod's Crypt, notably.
Wow. Stifling a Tormod's Crypt is fantastic, because that's the only way people have ever thought to interact.
So I'm just going to... we're loving Replenish right now. The thing is, all of this is assuming our opponent is doing nothing. So...
I gotta tell you, Lanny, your build with all 4 drops and no early game interaction is definitely losing to red in game 1.
I mean, it's got game against red. I can Plowshares the Jackal Pup and then
my opponent
impulse
go
in the
off
comp.
in both games, and just like, okay, you have everything. I'm gonna kill you on upkeep.
So
right? Like,
let's forgetting that for a second, because red is red. I mean, even Rich with any amount of his technology just simply decided that it was not going to be better than a 50% matchup. But
so why try? And also, red is at an all-time nadir. Except now, me and Bill were 2-1 or better at the local this week.
Yeah. Red's doing really well at pub trivia, but
you call it pub trivia, but when I am the league champion a few months from now, you're going to be like, congratulations on your pub trivia trophy.
yeah. I'm going to be like, I'm just going to be like,
did you buy an oat latte with that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna ask Rich to fly in and hand you the lobster trophy, right? But, he's just gonna be like, congratulations, Mike.
Was there enough prize money in
No. I mean, winning the league will be, if you win the league with Burn, that'll be pretty impressive, because I mean, it's a little complicated because you just play a different deck every week, but the league finals is like a top 8 single elimination type situation. So
sounds like Dreadnought.
It sounds like a Dreadnought pick. But anyways, so if you tied your opponent, they can so what they cannot do is they can't, like, they can't exactly float mana and naturalize. They can, of course, float mana and naturalize because you won't have the stifle up. But the cool thing is if they do that, you get to untap all your lands with Tide. They can play a swamp and then duress the stifle from your hand, which we've talked about on the cast.
That is a plan that Andy was worried about with Mono Blue.
Right. And they also can not play lands for 3 turns, which it's hard to come back from that.
Time walk, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to come back for that. But
it's just like
you might not find Opalescence, and then you just play the game like 2 turns up. So
on Monday when Andy beat me with Terraged, and I was like, should I have just been discarding? Instead of like trying to play, and then he got me with Weathered Wayfarer. Like I think that it's similar to that. Like you're not in good shape if they're executing Plan A and you're not executing anything, right? Like that's not good.
Well,
maybe it's better for you to like concede a little bit of card advantage and hope that their Plan A implodes as a result.
Right. So what you can do is you can reduce the amount of time the Tide is slowing you down by playing a land into it.
And then you could just
Well, they'll have 3 fade counters, but the nice thing that you can do is that you can simply play a fetch land, and then that takes 2 fade counters off, or they just probably, they might not bother even going after it. But the point is, after all this has happened, like the replenished player still has to kill you, and they can kill you with surprising inefficiency. Like the Tide Stifle plan exists so that you have enough time and mana to do the attunement plan, which is going to take a century. Like that's basically what's happening.
Replenish combo sequences are just such that you overwhelm your opponent in dramatic fashion, and then you have the slow plans in order to beat decks with interaction. But like if people are just mid-ranging, or if people are like giving you all these free turns,
if they're survivaling of the fittesting,
you should just be intuitioning, and in this case, factor fictioning, and they should be annihilated.
Right. But that's what always happens. Like that's the problem. Okay, so we've reached sort of the core problem with the deck is that it is being pulled in 2 quite separate directions, right? Like on one hand, it is trying to be like it's a deck that just absolutely has crushing inevitability against decks with limited
as long as you don't have 1,000 life, right?
Well, let's just say limited interaction, right? Because it's a little bit different. Like the attunement quote unquote engine is an engine that runs on your opponent's like your opponent's mid-ranginess, right? So like the less likely they're threatening to kill you or like forcing you to interact with them, the better attunement gets. But attunement is like really bad into like a counterspelly deck that is very happy for you. Like even if you're selecting for the right cards, like every turn you spin attunement, they're spinning impulse and factor fiction and flash of insight. And it's like, that's really not a fair fight, right? And you can't play those cards in your deck because you have 16 slots dedicated to combo pieces. So then you kind of have to sideboard into this deck that is like trying to figure out the best way to be a deck that is either like a tap out ramp deck, like a deck that just tries to play a threat every turn until it gets like 1 threat through.
That's how I like to play.
Right.
Yeah.
Which if your opponent is sort of judicious, they really only have to counter or answer Parallax Tide.
Wait, don't say this part too loud.
Yeah, and then
so here's the thing. I think that it's been 3 years since the colonization of the pre-modern community, right? Like, so Lan considers himself a 2nd generation pre-modern colonist, right? It's been 3 years. I think the average person doesn't still know that if you stop the replenishes and the opalescences, the replenish deck can't actually win. So nobody ever tries to, like, every deck basically has the Gear 2 option if they can stop these 8 cards. And it's not hard to stop some of them because, like, sometimes people do something like intuition for replenishes, or you have a single Tormod script that can counter multiple of these things. So don't say that too loud, or people might accidentally learn some technology from this vibes-based podcast.
I'm trying to think about like the other silly thing you can do, which is like if you just like have a Mox Diamond and you go like, okay, I lose everything, and then you just like untap and you just like play a land and then you play a Tranquil Domain, and then.
Ugh.
I mean, they have infinite mana and infinite attunement, so they can probably find the second Opalescence and then use that to tuck everything under.
Some things are real awkward because they're also bound by how many cards are in their library, right? So there's like a distance between wherever they are right now and wherever the card that they need is. Like that's the Dreadnought dilemma, right?
Okay,
like I do 1,000 cards, but all my 12/12s were in the bottom half.
So this is actually my case then, because I think that having 2 Opalescence in play is pretty great for your deck, because it means that you can't lose to naturalize, and it means that you
provided you have wave.
Yeah, of course. Like, so once you have the combo with 2 Opalescences, you can start tucking Opalescence under your wave. So then redundant copy. Like, I was basically in a situation where I had 2 waves and 2 Opalescences in play, right? So in that situation, if my opponent casts Tranquil Domain, I can tuck an Opalescence and a wave under another wave, resolve the Tranquil Domain, and be left with an Opalescence and a wave, right?
You're left with quote unquote the combo.
Right. So my goblins, like I was playing against goblins, right? And I was just kind of like slowly, like I had Opal Wave, right? But at any point, if they have Tranquil Domain, they get me, or just to naturalize, it helps, right? But
that's such an interesting matchup, because goblins has this trump card in Tranquil Domain, but like you said, you can craft a game plan that
you can choose to defeat it.
Card, yeah.
Like if they I think ideally goblins would have like only Tranquil Domains and Tormod's Crypts, right? And that would just like be pretty good. And like you wouldn't play Blue Blast
when
Red Blast.
When I was testing with you for the PSS finals, I never even sided in the Tormod's Crypt. I didn't like it. So I guess that's wrong.
Well, I don't know for sure. I mean,
maybe this is a second order thing.
I did the same thing with Tom, and Tom just did 2. Like he had access to 3 of everything, but he just did 2 Naturalize, 2 Pyroblast, and 2 Crypt. And like he just kind of didn't want to draw too many of the wrong thing, right? Because you can beat Blast by just playing white enchantments. You can beat Crypt by just playing white enchantments. You can beat Naturalize by just playing, replenish with 2 Opalescences, or just replenishing, getting the combo off.
I sided in all the blasts because my game plan was to be counter sliver, right?
Yeah.
So like I have a small amount of tempo. I'm sorry, a small amount of beatdown, and then I just use all of my non-goblin spells to manage time, right? And so versus I guess Tranquil Domain is like really an end game hammer sometimes.
Well, it's just rock paper scissors.
Sometimes it's just a natural.
It's just rock paper scissors, right? Like if you side in blast, if you side in a bunch of blasts, and I just you go turn 1 Lackey, I plow it. You go turn 2 Pile Driver, turn 3 War Chief, and then I go turn 4 Parallax Wave.
Yeah.
If you are sitting there looking at your hand of like 2 blasts, you're going to be really sad. But if you have exactly 1 Naturalize in your hand, then you'll be great.
I'm back in business.
Right.
The reason I didn't like Tormod's Crypt, other than my bias against, I just have a bias against Tormod's Crypt, right? Like I really like Phyrexian Furnace, and I've always hated Tormod's Crypt. Is just like Tormod's Crypt, you have to stick it out onto the battlefield against a deck that literally has access to Stifle and Seal of Cleansing, right? Like you could just, and Seal of Cleansing is part of the natural build of the deck, Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if the Replenish deck wants to have Seal of Cleansing post sideboard against goblins, because Tormod's Crypt is the only target, and then
no, it's not really
with the Tormod's Crypt in play.
Parallax enchantments is also a
yeah. I mean, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, because once you cast the Tormod's Crypt, it just tells the Replenish player exactly what they need to do, right? You can't gotcha them with the Tormod's Crypt unless they are like, they cast turn 3 attunement, they spin it on turn 4, and they do nothing afterwards. Then you play the Tormod's Crypt or whatever, or you play attunement, and then the Goblins player the next turn plays Tormod's Crypt. I actually had that turn where like I played an attunement, and like my Goblins opponent or one of my opponents just like played Tormod's Crypt, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not activating this anymore, because like what's the point, right? So but I totally agree that Crypt is like awkward in that sense, but the fact of the matter is sometimes the Replenish player has to cast the card Replenish to win the game in enough time, because the slow method is going to be too slow. Like it's trying to cast your enchantments is going to be too slow. So if you have Tormod's Crypt and a Naturalize and some creatures, like if your draw is exactly a couple goblins, tormots, crypts, and naturalized, then the replenish player is like very, very inefficient.
Let's try to conceptualize and codify how we would talk about this, right? So this is what I mean by that. I am so tickled that deck touching has entered the lexicon. People talk about deck touching all the time now, right? And that was a thing that we came up with, right? And so even though I had this article lined up that I posted about like ChatGPT, tell me how to write this angle or whatever. I'm like, oh my God, ChatGPT is the better Mike Flores. It knows who Mike Flores is, right? So I just started writing this other article, and first it was going to be called Drag, and then I'm like leveling it up, or like chunking it up, not leveling it up like it's a higher sophistication of thing, about just like how I try to approach certain types of matchups. But I have this concept called Drag that while I'm playing, the word drag appears in my head, and I know that I'm now playing a drag game, and I've never talked about it, but it's super intuitive to me, right? So there are a lot of things that the way I play that, you've explained to Rebel, for example, right? And like, no, I just assume everybody understands how to do this, so I just never talked about it. Like, so I know how to play a drag game. So I'm playing cards, and my opponent just keeps playing in a way where they're nominally engaging in 1-for-1s, or they're nominally engaging in trades, but rather than moving forward, they're just reinforcing my likelihood to win. Like that's like the whole concept is people think that you can move forward or move backwards, right? But it's actually you can move forward or you can go down. And if you go down 6 feet, you're dead, right? And so people are just like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm using my, you know what I'm saying? The people are using their cards.
I kind of
strategies
feel like you get in those games. This is maybe not a great example, but I think it's an interesting example to talk about. So like, if it used to be that the way that you combat the Dreadnought deck was just to sideboard 8 pieces of removal, right? And the play pattern that's emerged from sideboarding 8 removal against Dreadnought is that Dreadnought sideboards in 8 pieces of card advantage, and then every turn you draw 1 card per turn, and Dreadnought looks at 5 cards per turn and chooses the best one, right? And so you do this every turn, and every turn maybe you have a Sylvan Library in play, so you feel like you're kind of doing the same thing that they're doing, but every turn that passes, like the 8 removal spell player feels like they're getting ahead, right? They have 3 1/1s in play, maybe they kind of feel like they're getting ahead, and then all of a sudden there's a 12/12 in play, and then 5 protection spells later, you're just like wondering what happened. And like the Dreadnought player the entire time, like
always gonna win.
They were all. This is what I actually felt. That's what I was reminded of when you brought this up, because I have played against Terrageddon with Dreadnought about 4 or 5 times in the last few weeks, and I have won all but one time. And every single time I have won, I never at any point thought that I was going to lose the game, except for playtesting against Andy, where he had a few turns where he had a window to triple port me, then triple port me again, and then cast Armageddon, which I don't even know that Terrageddon players even keep in their deck after sideboarding, and this was just the angle that
Rich and SWB have something like 1 port in their version, so like they couldn't even take that line.
Right. So Andy's Terrageddon deck that's sleeved up right now is the 4-color version, but and then it's like Armageddon
4-color version, so obviously it has 3 to 4 times as many Rishodon ports.
Right. Naturally, yeah.
That makes perfect
The 2-color with 1 splash deck has 1 port, but the 4-color deck. But the thing is, so he has 3 ports, and he was like, I think you should play 4 ports. I think that this entire deck's identity against blue is to port them and resolve Armageddon, and then sideboard matches you port them and then resolve Armageddon with a Pyroblast, right? And so
Andy is such a strong strategic player. Like, I feel like if he took Magic seriously, he could be a Pro Tour champion.
Yeah,
he's so impressive.
Yeah, and instead he just wants to play Bauble Future Sight and just that's his ammo.
Like, you're just playing against him, and like I literally feel like I'm a mouse when I'm playing against him. Like,
he's the drag. he's the right.
I'm like, I'm just a mouse, and then he's just doing whatever he wants.
He's got the plan. Yeah.
No matter what the matchup, it's like when I beat him at LobsterCon, I just had the last Pyroblast, right? Like, that's why I won.
Right. That's how I feel playing against Rich, right? I only ever beat Rich if the order of my deck is better than his. Like I never beat him on evenses. But
the thing that I was going to kind of get to is I don't know if you can play, because one of the things that's informing kind of how I'm writing this article is you were yelling at me the other day and you're just like, I'm trying to optimize Andy's gameplay against your full range, right? Which is what I'm always trying to do. And I'm just like, I am so biased towards strategy superiority. So like my entire career, I either had a better deck or better information than people. And my point of view is always like, well, if you have a better deck and your opponent doesn't know what's going on, you're more likely to win. But the problem is it's 2025. People basically all have good decks.
Yeah, everyone's better at Magic. Yeah.
And and the information landscape is so much flatter. It's hard to play opportunistic Magic. So,
exploitive, as we like to borrow from the poker world.
Yeah, exploitative Magic is better than opportunistic in this case. Yeah, so I'm going to change that in my. It's hard to exploit, right? But like the situation that I wrote about in my drag article is just like my opponent just trying to get damage in with prowess creatures, and like it was so ineffectual, his usage of the most strategic cards in his deck, that I didn't even bother to kill his creatures. I'm just like, all right, I'll take 6 and go about my business.
I mean, this is also the sort of thing that happened, that could have happened. So did you watch the LobsterCon finals between Rich and Justin?
I have not watched it yet. The match I'm supposed to watch that I told Lanny I was going to watch was 80 Ho against.
Yeah, 80 Ho against Selden's a great match, but it's actually a match in which my job as a commentator analyst was failed, but it provided good entertainment value because Selden and I, two Mono Blue Dreadnought Muscle Doge senseis, were like watching as each turn passed by, and we were just like, well, Justin's just going to get buried here, right? Because Rich started putting more permanents on the board, whatever. And then the turn before it was about to happen, I was like, I can't believe we forgot this, Brian. I just like turned to Brian. I was like, I feel so embarrassed that we forgot this. Justin isn't playing for anything besides countering 3 Opalescences and 1 Replenish this game. And he's been doing that since turn 1. And we've been sitting there waiting for him to cast Dreadnought, and he is...
Oh my god, is this like my PSS?
It is exactly like
where I factor fictioned into the Thawing Glaciers, and all I had to do was take the Arcane Denial.
And yeah. That,
like, I'm like, oh.
The 4th counterspell, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, he literally can't win if I take the Arcane Denial.
You have the open deck list. You just couldn't turn down the Glaciers. No, so it actually did end up being that way because... Justin, the turn before, okay, so there's extremely exciting dynamics at play. The first one is Justin's awareness. So most Dreadnought players basically just pick up their cards, or they count, or they like are in a stage in the game where there's like 1 Enchantress in play, and they think that they can beat 1 Enchantress, so they try to counter Enchantresses 2, 3, and 4. But you can't beat 1 Enchantress. So once the first, you can beat 0 Enchantress, but you can't beat 1. So once the first one resolves, you have to pivot.
Such a sucker's game. I remember I was playing against Cam once. I was on Landstill and Cam was on Enchantress, and I'm just like, oh, I can beat this. He doesn't have that many ways to win, right? But then, I work so hard to get card advantage of +2 or +3, and he's just drawing 5 cards a turn. Right. This is just not going to go well for me.
Yeah. I mean, even more so now that every enchantment is also ritual draw 3 cards, because the innovation of the Rich Packer Toller version 14.03F final.psd is 3 Opalescence, 3 Waves, 4 Exploration, and 4 Serra Sanctum. So it is like fully completed the combo arc from Replenish, where it's just like it is not a recognizable deck in its current form, and I'll get into that by looping back.
We don't have enough cards to make this and Replenish at the same time. Does this deck lose to Replenish heads up?
So that is, I'll get into that. But I'll just say I'll lend you the cards, and you can just pick up 3 more. Well, I'll pick up the 3 more Parallax Waves, and then I'll lend you the cards. But because you just need the Parallax enchantments. So in order for you to build this deck and Replenish at the same time, you just need 8 copies of...
I only own 4 Opalescence.
Yeah, I have the Opals to lend, yeah. And I'm not using them in my Replenish deck because I don't have one.
I gave it to he who shall not be named.
Right. Anyways, so So Justin gets into this spot and he just needs to counter 4 spells, right? And so he has a hand with 4 counter spells, and he does basically the same thing that you do with the Thawing Glaciers, is that he's got like you up, and he's got like 2 counter spells and 2 foils in his hand and a gush, right? And so he just casts a portent because why not, right? And Rich goes like Opalescence, and then Justin counters it, right? And then Rich goes like Opalescence, and like Justin counters it. And at this point, I told Selden in the booth, I'm just like, okay, Justin's got this, because like Rich probably can't even find the next 2 Opalescence and Replenish.
This is only in game 1, right?
This is game 1, right? In game 2 and 3, in sideboard games, Rich has Carpet of Flowers and Xanted Swarm. It's just like Justin can't win.
But Gaia's Blessing also.
Yeah, and Gaia's Blessing, exactly. So Justin really can't win. But this is game 1, and I tried to tell him, I was like, I mean, Rich might not even have the Opalescence. He might not. He needs another 8 mana. He needs like another. He needs so much more to like string this together. So I was just like, Justin's got this, and Rich casts the 3rd thing, and Justin foils, and then Rich like still has like 2 land drops remaining because he has 11 explorations in play. So he's just like, okay, well, I'll play another Serra Sanctum. I will sacrifice my Sterling Grove. I'll find the last Opalescence. I'll play another enchantment. I'll play the last Opalescence. And at that point, Justin is looking down at the island that he tapped for Portent and the counterspell in his hand. And then he was just like, uh-oh. But shout out to Justin. He was just like, apparently just fully blazed the entire day, managing to make it to the finals of LobsterCon. So channeling some LobsterCon greats by only being able to play an Altered Consciousness. So I wanted to address the other thing that she said, which is the new Enchantress deck, combo Enchantress, champions Enchantress, a dog to replenish. So historically, Enchantress has been a super dog to replenish because Enchantress doesn't like getting tide comboed, doesn't like getting opal waved, and loses to basically both those things most of the time. But now that this deck is so fast, if you're able to sort of get your 2 Enchantresses going, and you have your explorations, you can be in a scenario where you might have 2 Sterling Groves, which
counteracts Opal Wave,
right? Which could make things interesting. You can borrow so you could have 2 Sterling Groves, and then you would actually be a lock to win, because you probably, You would be in a favorable spot to win, with the exception of you would have to do it without very many lands in play. But you can start chump blocking your replenished opponent's guys with Miri's Guiles,
it doesn't look good to me. I'm saying, like, just look at the outlook of this deck. They're
Oh yeah, so
it's like my plan A beats your plan A.
Well, no. So you would get fought. Don't get me wrong. For the history of premodern, Replenish has been very, very favored against Enchantress, and I'm sure the Data Crew project says the same. But just hear me out. So if you have 2 Sterling Groves in play, your opponent actually can't really attack if you have random enchantments, because you can just double block the Parallax Wave, and they can decide whether or not they're going to lose their Parallax Wave or keep the game stalemated, up until the point where if you establish solitary confinement, then they literally can't win. So Enchantress has outs.
So if you have Sterling solitary confinement, you still have to be able to upkeep the solitary confinement.
Yeah, that's true, but
which you might not be able to do through.
But you only have to do it.
Tide combo.
You only have to do it until you have like 100 power and enchantments in play, and your opponent doesn't have the same, right?
Well, no, but they can just keep you down on tide combo indefinitely until you just run out.
They can't. There's a finite amount of times they can tide combo, and you have the benefit of.
Not if they have Opalescence.
That's true. So then you would have to do it in a hurry. But you have access to Seal of Cleansing though. So like you can if you get to Seal of Cleansing, you can cast it off of like just remember every time you're drawing like if you're at the state of the game, right, you're drawing multiple cards off each of your enchantresses. So like for each action, you can kind of like counteract and get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm gonna like I'll just Seal of Cleansing your Opalescence or whatever. I'll Seal of Cleansing, like I'll make it possible. Like you can basically get tided, play a Sarah Sanctum, draw a bunch of cards, use your exploration to like keep playing cards and draw a bunch of cards again, get tided again.
Sterling Grove Carpet of Flowers gives you something, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have Carpet of Flowers in the sideboard against Replenish, but the point is you can get to this game state and you can get there quite fast. Like, so you're right. If the Replenish deck has a bunch of stuff really fast before you have a bunch of stuff, then you're in trouble. But if you have a bunch of stuff, then you might be able to grind them out, or you might actually just be able, now the deck is like 1 or 2 turns faster, you might actually just kill the Replenish deck before they kill you.
So yeah, that's like, is there enough there? Here are my thoughts. If it's going, so my favorite thing in these kind of decks is like we go to libraries, who wins, right? Yeah. Replenish wins if you go to libraries. I think that's the consensus. It is clear to me that this version of Enchantress has some opportunities and for exploitative play and like to sneak in Sarah Sanctums for big burst turns and stuff. But it has to kind of put the game away. Like you're saying, you have to kill them. Yeah. If you don't kill them, their ability to just keep doing Tide combo is a problem because the Replenish deck can actually stop the Enchantress deck from doing a big thing. And the Enchantress deck can only stop the Replenish deck from doing a big thing after the big thing has already happened.
Well, right? your Enchantress deck can scale the amount of power on the battlefield much faster than the Replenish deck can, right? So, like, you kind of go from, like, you know...
No, but you have to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to do it. If it doesn't get done now, you need another Sarah Sanctum burst.
You'll be there by turn 6, right? And often the Replenish deck, if it doesn't have the intuition line, isn't going to be there right, at turn 6 either. Yeah.
This is, I don't know to what degree this incorporates the newest data from LobsterCon, but just I just don't look. What is the win rate of Replenish versus Enchantress? Who do you think's ahead, and what do you think they're ahead by?
Replenish is ahead. Enchantress has 12%.
Wow, that's pretty close. And this is kind of a lot of matches.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is lots of matches, and Enchantress has less than 10%. They have 9.4%.
Okay, so this is my hot take. My hot take is that combo Enchantress is closer to 35.
35.
I'll give him a third of the time. A third of the time and a little zhuzh.
So you need
Rich beat Enchantress in his winning in.
You mean he beat Replenish?
He beat Replenish. He beat Replenish using your Enchantress in his winning.
If you're the best pre-modern player with the new build that people aren't ready for, you might get there.
Well, you know what's hysterical? If in your side, okay, so here's a few things you have going for you. You have double Sterling Grove going for you. You have borrowing your opponent's Opalescence going for you.
That's the
you have post sideboard. You can just Gaia's Blessing your opponent's stuff. Like if they're spinning attunement, you could be like, okay, well,
you can also get to the point where Gaia's Blessing your own stuff will win the game.
Right. So you've got that. And you've got Seal of Cleansing. Like, if you have like Seal of Cleansing, I need to check if
is there any permanent that makes it so they can't target lands?
No, there isn't. The only one is like a hilarious one. It's the 1 white mana basic lands can't be targeted if you control 3 or fewer or whatever it is. But
if we're controlling 3 or fewer, we're not executing on our game plan, and
exactly.
Our deck runs on non-basic lands.
Exactly. So. Yeah. So Rich has no Tormod's Crypts, but he does have Aura of Silence on the sideboard. So basically, all I'm saying is that one, Rich did beat Replenish. I don't know if it was close. Like it probably was close. It probably was 3 games.
That's probably a matchup that even if it's not close, looks or feels close.
Yeah, I mean that's like the Enchantress player just sitting there, and like at any point they can just die. They can start the turn with 20 permanents and end the turn with 0. But it's also defined by like the other thing is like as you notice, I moved the Seal of Cleansing from the main deck of my my Replenish deck to the sideboard. So if the Replenish deck isn't playing as many Seal of Cleansings to manage a card like Sterling Grove or manage opposing whatever Enchantress's Presence, you name it, then Enchantress is going to gain some points. And I'm saying all this because I played a practice match. A lot of people are picking up Enchantress after Rich's win. I played a practice match of Replenish versus Enchantress, and I was surprised. One, maybe because I took all the frantic search and like the turbo elements out of my Replenish deck, but like I was surprised that the Enchantress deck I felt like could get to a position that could beat me. I still won the match, but I was like, oh, I used to just. It just
you
didn't
thought
matter
this
what I
was
did.
just an old woman in a wheelchair at the top of a staircase.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Absolutely.
now there's a crash bag at the bottom of the staircase and a brake on the wheelchair.
Or she just like, she just has like a gun.
She gets a
gun.
I read the funniest line recently. So I read all Jack Reacher, you see this show on Amazon?
That's like is that a Tom Cruise?
He did 2 movies, which is like Tom Cruise cannot be Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher is like 6'6", and he's just like the toughest dude from the army. Like casting Tom Cruise is like among the worst casting jobs you could possibly.
Okay, does he originate in like a comic or other IP then?
It's a novel series.
Okay,
right?
novel.
So,
okay.
So I started reading these novels. I'd watched the first season on Amazon Prime, which is pretty good. The show's excellent, right? It's like one of the runaway hits for Amazon Prime. But I'm like there's so many books. There's like 30 Reacher books or something, right? So, but I'm like 15 books in, and they somehow get better. And anyway, here's this great line, which is like, well, the best strategy against a knife is to pull out a gun and shoot them from 10 feet away. Right? I'm like, that is the best strategy against a knife.
Yeah, I feel like Indiana Jones covers this.
And I'm just saying, but it's funny.
Yeah, it's well put. Yeah,
because like one of Reacher's defining characteristics is he's a very good fighter. Like he basically is like this homeless drifter, but like you just learn all these things over the course of the books. Like he was like a very impressive military guy, and he has all these qualities that are like basically Batman. But like he just seems like this homeless dude who only owns a toothbrush,
Right.
And,
so this kind of actually goes all the way to my overarching thesis of the podcast, which is that we are actually currently in gun to a knife fight battle cruiser premodern. The top 8 decks of LobsterCon are all Hulks: Enchantress, Stifle Not, Elves, Tide Control, Devour, Angry Hermit, and Enchantress. And then as we go further on down the line, Stifle Not again, Replenish,
Hulk.
Terrageddon is the only Iron Man here.
It still has Terravor Armageddon.
Yeah, it still has an Armageddon.
Cataclysm. I mean, like Terravor Cataclysm is such a killer. Like that stops go wides.
Yeah, absolutely. Elves once again, Stifle Out once again. Tribe combo. It's listed as Tribe combo, but I believe this is the version without the combo, so that's going to be the fairest deck in the top 16 here.
I watched Javier play.
Yeah,
that I didn't watch all the LobsterCon coverage, but I watched some of this live.
Yeah, and then Enchantress, and then in 16th place. Actual land still with no tides in it.
That's Iron Man Mark 1.
Yeah,
that's
so
like
this is the first one. Yeah, it's the one he built in a cave.
Yeah,
it's just like
not even the nanites.
It's just the freaking car battery that's just attached to your heart.
17th. What kind of BS is that?
Yeah. We got a little bit. New York got a little bit owned in the main event.
Animal in 20th. So these guys are both 1 win more. They would have been in top 8, right?
Yeah. So
Roland 23rd, Jeff Ferris 24th. Oh, Tolar was not in the house this year, I heard.
Yeah, he was not. He needed some sleep, so he booked a hotel.
Kaplan 32, 80 Ho 33. Man, this was a murderer's row. D-Tau 36. Once you get out of the top 16, this is a.
Yeah, it's a murderer's row, and then it's a murdered row.
The top 8 is also a murderer's row, right? You've got Jens Jaeger and but Cameron is in 9th and Hendry is in 15th.
Yeah.
That's
again shouting out
kneecap and kneecap.
Yeah, once again shouting out Cameron Heiss and Ian Hendry, the 2 absolute stone cold killers of LobsterCon, just like unable to not be in the mix every single year, which is not something that Rich Shea could say, not something that as of this year Brian Selden could say. Flint hasn't shown up. So at this point, it's actually very hard to make a case that these 2 are not on the pre-modern Mount Rushmore. And then, of course, Javi Lugo top 8'd last year and is the top 16 this year. This year with Tireless Tribe, that's definitely pretty exciting. But
I mean, if Hidfi had won with Tireless Tribe, that would have been the most impressive because, I mean, if you run through this deck, I guess Meddling Mage is a playable card.
I'm told that Tribe is supposed to be excellent against Enchantress, and any deck that can like quiet spec for Ray of Revelation, I'm sure is.
I believe. I mean, this was talking about Naya Enchantress, but Sam said it was the absolute worst possible matchup, right? Because they have Volcanic Spray.
Right. Okay, actually, I forgot about Volcanic Spray, which is hysterical. But yeah, this is where are all of and in case you're not following, my very first and only Magic the Gathering article is on Medium. It's called Iron Man versus the Hulk, and the article effectively categorizes decks into Iron Mans, which are like smart billionaire robot suit decks with like bunch of gadgets and toys, and then Hulk decks, which are decks that smash. And basically Iron Man decks can only contain Hulk decks until, you know, like on a long enough time frame, like there will only be Hulks, right? Well, Iron Man turns to dust.
Two things. One, this is an excellent Magic the Gathering article. LSV himself said it was an excellent Magic the Gathering article. It's the only one Lanny's ever written, but it is fantastic. It's like, you know, at the time it was the one time Lanny had ever beaten me at a meetup, and as a celebration, he's going to write one of the best Magic articles of all time. B, there was probably a time we couldn't even talk about this article because it is basically an extended analogy, and we were, you know, not an
anti-analogy podcast.
Yeah. But now we are an analogy-friendly podcast, so we can talk about it.
Yeah, and I think about this now when I try to build decks and like think about like kind of deck building personalities, because I do think that there are like there are personality types that like having tools and like having, you know, these like toolboxy answers to things decks, like decks that can do stuff against other decks. And I just look at this top 8 and I can't help but just be like, okay, well, Terrageddon basically MIA, Black Green Survival Rock just like completely 45% at the tournament.
Burn was a win out of the top 8 in 19th.
Maybe not, right? So the size of this tournament doesn't mean that, like, you can only infer that the top 16 players play win and ends, but well, actually you can't even infer that. It basically, you just don't know when people took their second loss, right? So generally speaking, people will take their second loss. The people who took their second loss in like the last round of the tournament are going to be in the top 16. But for instance, Heiss went into round 9 with a 6-2 record, I think. So he just like won round 9 to go win in 9th. But regardless, I don't think it says much for Burn when it is the sole Burn deck in the top. Let's keep scrolling. 46. The next one is our friend Chris DiBiase, who I'm going to actually play later today with my Dreadnought deck, which is 0-2 against Burn, I might add, later. But I just think that, yeah, the power level of the decks in Premodern is scaling upwards. The Tide Control deck is a blue-white Tide Control deck from young Joshua Kuchinksis, channeling a little Itai Kurtzman himself by top fouring LobsterCon at the ripe age of, I guess, 19 or something. So always love it when the people younger than Premodern itself just show up and crush the boomers. He doesn't play Impulse in the deck. He just plays,
like his Impulse sucks.
He just plays Factor Fiction and Standstill. Like the control decks can't even play like cantrips. They have every card has to be Wrath of God, Swords of Plowshares, Mana Leak, or Factor Fiction, right? Or Tide.
Wait, his deck is full. So like, how do you make room for 4 Parallax Tide, a Stifle?
Yeah, you don't play 4 Parallax Tide would be like the answer, right? Because like sometimes you're gonna draw a Parallax Tide, but this deck is saying the opposite, right? So control. Playing Impulse used to effectively have this kind of band of draws where it was just like, I'm going to impulse the thing for the thing I need. So I can play a little bit less Wrath of God, a little bit less Humility, a little bit less Parallax Tide, Seal of Cleansing, a little bit less of everything, and then use Impulse. Like you could even play less lands, right? And use Impulse to string it together.
Just don't need Wrath of God as much these days.
Yeah, Wrath of God is barely a thing. So On the other hand, you could also just play 27 lands. You can play Sky Cloud Expanse to fix your mana.
I did notice that.
And you can just play a bunch of spells that do things and hope you draw the right ones. And then guess what? After sideboarding, you board out your Seal of Cleansing if you don't need it. You board out your like whatever. But like this is like a Tide deck and it's a control deck. And, you know, it even has 2 Fairy Conclave. Like there's just so much going on here.
When I thought of Tide control before kind of the wave, let's say, of mono blue Tide in the New York area led by Andy Levine, I was thinking blue white Tide. Really, that was the one that I was, because that was kind of what Rich used to play.
Yeah, it was the Mark Garrett vote deck. It was the control deck before Parfait.
And so I would just I haven't played with this deck ever. I haven't played against this deck ever. I only know one thing about it. Loses to 23andMe, heads up. I don't know anything else, but this deck is not good against 23andMe.
Yeah, you have a very good matchup against decks that are bad against Sabo's Web, because you play 4 Sabo's Web in the main deck. And that's your entire strategy is to beat decks with Sabo's Web.
That is not true.
And then the rest of the decks that are unaffected by Sabo's Web, you just have to sideboard them out.
Oh, it's funny in the bougie. What do you call it? The bougie Discord? Premium Discord.
I just call it the follower Discord.
The follower Discord.
Quick shout out to Trading on Tilt, Oscar S, Daniel Meza Madrigal, Shroom. You can check out his content on YouTube. He's been making premodern videos with paper, basically the videos that you said we should make, which is like paper gameplay.
Now I don't have a job
with like 4 cameras and like 10 microphones, and I'm just like, I don't want to do that because I don't really want to deal with getting you and me in the same place once a week.
A great YouTube channel. That sounds fantastic.
It is. And then you have to edit it. Anyways, I
don't edit it. That's not.
The homie Matt P.
I can barely get my OBS to run.
Lantax Weenie, Matt P. OFBTS, Joseph Rogers, and of course Ellen Dryle, Mike Arnold, Luis Neiman, Luis Not Vargas, and Jake Speed. Thank you for supporting Spike Colony. I am officially going to make merch, so hold me to it. We're going to make some Fuck It We Ball caps, and I'm going to start doing some custom promos.
We shouldn't make 23andMe merch because people would get confused.
Yeah, they would get confused. Yeah.
Well,
23andMe should stop making any stuff because they're bankrupt, and people might think that we're there talking about the deck.
Yeah, I don't want to associate myself to them. Javier Lugo here with 61 cards. Very, very excellent 61 card tightness in his tutor-based deck.
What's the last cut? Don't have to cut.
That's actually the thing. I asked Lan about cutting Landy Hoth to 61 cards. He gets angry at me when I ask that question. He's just like, the deck is perfectly tuned. Why would I want to cut a card? I'm like, why don't you cut a singleton? I don't know. The Crows and Reclamation.
Yeah, got the Crows and Reclamation. I'm definitely look at the second Mox Diamond. That's the card that I want to take out of Landy Hoth.
Well, he doesn't want to take anything out.
I mean, that's his prerogative. But so shout out to the homies that are supporting the Discord, and at the moment, it is still the only place where you can find, with some effort, scrolling and searching, the official, unofficial deck list for 23andMe, which only contains 14 sideboard cards.
Because Andy had to borrow one of the blasts for his deck at LobsterCon and didn't give it back.
So there's that.
That's the reason why.
This deck is too chill in the sideboard and no way to restrict the burn deck's mana. But yeah, I don't know. If you want to play a blue-white deck with Guy's Blessing, just head over to ko-fi.com/Spike Colony. We won't gatekeep the list, though. We'll probably just post it on the Spike Colony Facebook.
I was going to, because I got the deck back, right? So Andy borrowed it over LobsterCon, so I was going to make a deck pick for my Instagram, so you might be able to find it there, but I hadn't done it yet.
Right, so there might be a 23andMe deck pick coming soon. I also should plug, as part of the Magic Online creator program, I am now authorized to give away Magic Online codes, which you can use to cube draft or play a contemporary
so you're
format.
is that like an official thing?
Yeah, I'm affiliate with Daybreak. Shout out to Daybreak. They give me an account so I can. People were complaining on my YouTube about the new border cards, and I was just like,
So they give you a God account also?
Yeah, they give me a God account. Yeah.
How do I get in on this? Should I just make videos again?
I mean, yeah, it would start by having a Magic Online account that you use, and then go from there.
I invented Magic Online on YouTube.
Well, unfortunately for you, Wizards of the Coast no longer really is in terribly much control of the Magic Online software, and it's in the hands of Daybreak. So you have a new group of people to explain who's the beatdown to, with the possibility that they were born after it was written. In any case, I have these codes to give away, so I'm going to write a post right now. What is your favorite episode of Spike Colony? And then
probably that tempting worm one that I said that we shouldn't post.
You called me in distress, and I was like, it's already out.
What are you doing?
And answer this question with your favorite episode of Spike Colony. And a random person will be selected to receive a code, which you can do a little vintage cube draft. You can play a little vintage league, do whatever you want, 120 play points. So you'll be selected randomly.
I wanted to point out that in the Discord, not by Sam, but by one of Sam's avatars, apparently, that Sam has built his own version of 23andMe, but inexplicably has the Sabos webs in the sideboard. How do you ever win?
Yeah, it's tough when you can't draw cards from Dismantling Blow.
He still has
Dismantling Blow, which is important.
But he has moved Sabos web to the sideboard. Like, what? And he has Gush? Gush seems like an odd... I mean, I guess there's a lot of islands in 23andMe, but like that seems like an odd card to play in this deck. And he has Intuition. No, sorry. He has Flash of Insight, which is a card that I've wanted to play. But I think Intuition is better than Gush in this deck. We can Intuition for Flash. We can Intuition for Guy's Blessing. Maybe we go down to 2 Guy's Blessing as a result.
Yeah, these are all options. I think people should play the deck more and arrive at a place where they're happy, and then take it to a real tournament and show us what you got.
I don't think you can finish a round.
You can't finish a round, yeah.
That's the problem. Like, you are in commanding position.
I actually played a version on Magic Online where I got to a point where I could like decree my opponent out. Yeah. So they I got to a point where I had like a Factor Fiction split where I could take Decree of Justice, or I could shuffle my whole like graveyard into my library, and I was just like,
you chose the
I was like, let's shuffle. and then my opponent, who's playing black-white control, I was just like playing with my food. They had 4 Decree of Justice of their own, and so they actually managed, like with like 10 seconds left on their match timer, to decree me out to take game 1. So I played game 1. Because
you played with your food
for 40 minutes. But I just wanted to see. I was just like, okay, well, what happens if we just keep playing? Like, am I actually able to exhaust them? And I actually wasn't able to exhaust them.
In an untimed round, you might easily have been able to exhaust them. The problem that I've come up with is a lot of the time, because the deck currently only has 2 Decree of Justice in the main deck, like I'm playing against Stifle Knot, or I'm playing against like Tide Control, or I'm playing against the new like the blue-white version.
They could just stifle the
decree. And so I'm just thinking, like, I need.
So you have to decree. Something. You have to decree for like 3 tokens, and then hold up Absorb and Counterspell.
And so the spot that I've been getting in a lot is like, I need them to do something, but almost always for this, the definition of them doing something would kill me. Right, so like they're waiting until they can cast multiple Tides, for example, right? So if I'm in this situation, I have to cast multiple. I have to hold back multiple counterspells, right? That's one thing. And so at the end of this big turn, I even if I'm not dead, I've used like 11 mana. I don't have any mana left for the decree.
There are problems, yeah.
Yeah. So and I in one of the matches that I won at the meetup this week, I was so far ahead, I had 7 cards in hand, and I just didn't realize I had cast 5 counterspells over the course of the previous 2 turns. So I had 7 cards in hand. I'm like,
None of these are counters.
None of these are counters.
Shields are down.
If he has tide, it's gonna hit, right? So I'm like, I gotta get the Gaia's Blessing going now. I have to go ahead to find the Gaia's Blessing. It is complicated to play perfectly, and the games take a long time. So I don't think this is a deck you can play in timed rounds.
Yeah, I don't think it's a deck that you can play, period, but you can...
What if you're like untimed round? What if...
No, if you play it in untimed rounds, that's just bad sportsmanship. Then you're just like holding your opponent hostage. Don't play this deck or lands in untimed rounds in various webcam showcase series for the good of the viewers. And shout out to Epic, the European PSS, which has timed rounds, which is very welcome. Just let them take a draw, and I'm totally fine with that.
I think untimed rounds, 23andMe people would love it. I think that's the thing that they would love to watch.
I think it would maximize the PSS viewership.
You should have seen Twitch chat during the Landy Hoth standstill matchup. There was a lot of contention over whether or not what was being viewed was good entertainment. I thought that it was great. Obviously, I had a horse in the race, but some viewers found the blue mirrors to be pretty difficult to watch. Shout out to all the commentators from the weekend, keeping people alert during the draw land go.
I would just like to point out that in an untimed round, I went very long against BK playing red white slide one year. Mano said Mike should just concede out of sportsmanship, and I won that game.
What happened in the match?
I lost.
Oh, okay.
Like all my other matches that year.
Okay. Well, proud of you for the game win.
There weren't many. There were not many.
Well, that's Hulk premodern for you. Is there anything exciting? Hartford is this weekend. Shout out to the people battling it out. And
is that tomorrow or
SCG Hartford? It's the premodern tournament is tomorrow.
You want to? Yo.
It's a Sunday premodern. I have plans, but you can.
I have plans also, but you have. Let's get on the horn.
You can ask. You can ask whoever.
Lots of people have a car.
Yeah, plenty of people could go to Hartford. I don't know if anybody.
Is Hartford farther than the Connecticut we went to last time?
No, it's a similar Connecticut. I think it's like an hour and a half drive or 2 hours on the train or whatever. But regardless, I'll be excited to see the results of that. I'll be excited to see the results of the Magic Online Premodern Challenge. I've got a couple of YouTube videos in the clip, but I can't publish them because I am still playing in those tournaments. I've made the top cut of the last two leagues in a row, and as a result, I am waiting to play out the playoffs so I can make it.
Are you gonna make your way to the league this week?
So the league, I can basically, like, on Thursdays, I'm kind of like only free until maybe around 8 o'clock, so I can play one round every week. Well, what if I played one round every week and I won one round every week, and that qualified me?
That's not a great use of like $16.
That qualified me for the playoffs.
So here's my record so far. So I just showed up to the first league, even though they were had already started, and Jen the judge let me play, so I got to win that week. Then I went 1-2 the second week playing goblins. Then I went 3-0 last week. I don't know where that puts me. Is there a standing somewhere?
I don't know. I'm sure you can find it.
I'm sure Bill's doing
But yeah,
Lan has a win. I'm sure Bill's doing better. I think he's 2-1 or better in every league so far.
Yeah, I mean, our locals are listening to this podcast and they know about the league, and they can tell their friends who don't play pre-modern that the league's a great opportunity to play organized pre-modern and maybe show up for your first pre-modern matches ever and win it all. If you are in the New York area and you want to stay up to date on New York stuff, you can poke around for the New York Discord. Get that from Phil, get that from me. I actually think there's a regional servers tab in the main pre-modern Discord now. So you can check out New York via that. And then in our events tab, Phil Wynn does an incredible job keeping the events tab up to date with everything that's going on. So shout out New York and the Order of the Sacred Torch. We have the Sacred Torch Showdown coming up. It is nearing its cap, which was increased first to 64 players and then again to 75 players. So we have a cap of 75 players, and there are only 2 spots left last time I checked. But if those 2 spots fill, we can work out a waiting list situation. That's going to be on July 19th. I heard that there are going to be out-of-towners from Duress Crew. I heard there's going to be out-of-towners from potentially Italy.
Italy?
Yeah, stuff that I could not believe when I heard, but is exciting news either way. So really excited for that. I'm currently working on the Ratatouille altar for best cook of the tournament. Whoever brings the most innovative deck will get an altered Ravenous Rats with Remy from Ratatouille, and more exciting promos and stuff around that, aside from the 2.5k cash prize that we're going to have at the cap that we are definitely going to hit. So hyped for all of the above. Definitely pretty excited to...
Do we have a player list? We should do a draft. This is just basically LobsterCon.
That's true. But yeah, I'm hyped to bring some sweaty pre-modern back to New York City and show up and show out for that. We'll see about doing...
Last Sacred Torch Showdown, and I almost quit pre-modern until I had fried chicken.
Yeah, and we'll see about doing sort of the same time walk coverage deal for that. Live coverage... I think it's a little bit much. Shout out to Jay, who had the incredible live coverage setup that I have no intent to replicate in the near future for our events. But we will have some post tournament coverage for sure. And, there's definitely be opportunities for that. And, shout out once again, Mike got his Chris Rush signed lightning bolts in hand from Down with the Disease. So I think that's also a Chris. Everyone's name is Chris or Matt. Oh Jesus, now I feel bad. I think it was Chris. But anyways, Down with Disease. Thank you. That card is in hand. And got a shout out Ricardo Barros. Ricardo Barros, who made some Lanny War Elves and Michael Jackal Pup Flores altars for us, and we love you very much. This has been, it's been an awesome month of pre-modern. Everything's just kind of looking up. There's more hype, more content.
Red is apparently not dead. That makes me happy.
Red may or may not be dead. Red kind of, I don't know. I think I was like roughly correct when it comes, just look at it's. Oh yeah, so this we'll have to save for another podcast. We'll have Mike Hoyt on to talk about his run to second place with Goblins after having Smiths
first and second place in that tournament.
Yeah,
the most competitive environment, which is the
second most competitive
for the 3-0 league this week. Red did well again. I can't.
We'll see. I'm 0-2 against Burn with Blue White Dreadnought. I'm going to play Chris DiBiase in 30 minutes. So maybe by the time you are listening to this, I'll be 0-3 against Burn.
It's notably with Enchantress Rising is one of the best decks. That's not good for Red.
Yeah, it's not ideal.
It's like one of the all-time worst matchups.
If all of the replenish players who felt like they didn't like their Red matchup just switched to the Solitary Confinement deck, then it's not great news. It's not great news. But maybe I don't know. Is it Anarchy time? No.
That's a forecast and cost spell, man. According to Duress Crew, the Enchantress is only 42.4%, so you can win almost half.
Yeah, you can get there. I mean, what's kind of hilarious is that we've been playing around with some Goblin Cadets in the sideboard for our Dreadnought matchup. Mike, what happens when you block Goblin Cadet with an Argothian Enchantress?
They get a Goblin Cadet.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But then they can't block with that until later, and then they give it back to you.
They just attack you with it. What if you give them Plan B?
I don't think the Enchantress player is going to attack you with it, but they certainly.
But it's just like a free blocker, right?
Well, it's a free blocker every other turn. It's a free blocker one time.
Yeah, but the red deck draws one card a turn.
It can't block a Ball Lightning.
It can block a Ball Lightning.
Well,
it doesn't do
not profitably. But I'm hyped on Goblin Cadet. I purchased my new border Goblin Cadet copies, which I'll happily lend to you to put into the meme deck sideboard. I got Mog Salvage at Meetup, by the way. I had a turn against Juttermang. And
yeah, Chris.
Yeah, Chris Cruz. Shout out Chris, also a Spike colonist. I
Grand Prix
had
Levine top 8 competitor.
I had turn 2 combo, and I went for it against his one open mountain. So I don't have days in my blue-white control style Dreadnought deck. So he blasts, and I blast back, or I foil or whatever. I just use one of the counter spells in my hand. And the plan is to untap and counter the next thing. And he was just like, okay. And then he was like, wait. And I was just like, he has the tapped mountain, and I'm just like, you have Mog Salvage? And then he was like, Mog Salvage, and I'm like, no, that's the only card I can't beat in this spot.
I'm checking if I have Mog Salvage in this pile that's on my desk, because like Andy said, I should just take out the overloads because they're just not appropriate to the meme deck.
That's true. Mog Salvage has to be it. But while you look for those,
I do.
I think it's
I have these shiny, ugly ass Mog Salvage.
Yeah, you got the
right here.
Don't call him ugly or woke. Where you're
Oh, sorry, woke
Yeah,
Michael J is gonna get upset. It's the new border foil. I don't know what set this is from.
Yeah,
probably like Modern Horizons or something.
But love Spy Colony.